NAFSA Teleconference, why you and all of higher education have a stake in immigration reform and what you can do about it. We're pleased to have more than 300 institutions represented on the call today. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items to cover. This teleconference is being recorded and will be available for download within the next couple of days. The teleconference is open to the public, and we have a wide variety of people representing many different aspects of immigration reform represented. We will spend the next hour hearing from speakers from the NAFSA office in Washington, D.C., and a NAFSA member who has had success advocating on campus, who will speak about the role each of you play in influencing the immigration reform conversation in your communities. The first speaker today is Heather Stewart. Heather is the Counsel and Director of Immigration Policy in the Public Policy Department at NAFSA, Association of International Educators. Heather has been with NAFSA for 8 years and previously served as the Government Relations Counsel at the American Council on International Personnel and Liaison Associate with the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Heather received a JD from Loyola University, New Orleans College of Law, and a BA from Mercer University. The second speaker is Ellen Badger. Ellen has been the Director of International Student and Scholar Services at Binghamton University, State University of New York, for more than 26 years. In her current position at Binghamton, Ellen leads a staff of 10 who provide programs and services to more than 2,100 F1 and J1 international students, scholars, and faculty. Binghamton is a 2004 recipient of the NAFSA Senator Paul Simon Award for Excellence in Internationalization. Ellen has served on the NAFSA Board of Directors twice and has held a number of leadership positions in NAFSA on both the regional and national level. She is a frequent presenter at NAFSA annual and regional conferences. She has presented sessions titled Working with the Media and The Power of Persuasion, Influencing Decision Makers on Campus and Beyond. Her professional areas of interest include federal regulations, undocumented students, staff development, and office management. At the end of the program, we will have a question and answer period. However, you are welcome to ask your question at any time by typing it into the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. At this time, I would like to invite Heather Stewart to get us started.
Thanks, Carrie. Thank you, everyone who is listening in today. I look forward to your questions later on. Starting off, nearly everybody in the United States and probably around the world agrees that the immigration system is broken. Since the last major immigration reform in 1996, there have been attempts to fix it, to tinker with it, but the discussions on this have stalled at this time. When people talk about the broken system, people mainly focus on illegal immigration and the border. Rarer is the discussion of how the legal immigration system doesn't function as it needs to function. By this I mean to say that the law doesn't work for people who want to come here legally. This is true if someone is highly skilled and talented who wants to come to the United States, even if they're needed in the United States. And that's the case even if the person wants to work and is needed to be on campuses at U.S. institutions of higher education. The institutions that seek to hire and seek to have speakers come to the United States know that the immigration system doesn't work for U.S. higher education or international education. What this means is that people in higher education and people who care about international education must explain to other people how the immigration system needs to be fixed. It's incumbent on us, those who care about international education, to do this work. Without that, people who don't understand higher education or international education will be making decisions that will affect the future of those. Few people understand the unique needs of U.S. higher education. Even fewer understand how the role of immigration policy plays in creating educational opportunities for U.S. students. Translating this is your job to much degree, and you have to do it more than once, kind of a lather, rinse, repeat situation. You can't just explain it once. And really, if higher ed and international education don't care about fixing the immigration system so that it works, who will? Who else can explain to decision makers on campus, in Congress, and in our community what is wrong and what needs to be fixed? That old saying, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, is true. It's true in Congress, and if Congress was concerned with regular maintenance of immigration law, they would have fixed it already. They would have been tinkering with this and making it less squeaky. But it hasn't been revised. It's been revisited, but we can't come to any agreement on how to fix it. And when I say we can't come to any agreement on how to fix it, I mean more so that Congress can't come to an agreement. There have been many studies done, much polling done that shows that Americans really want the immigration system to be fixed. They want it to work. So you, as people who understand higher education and international education, must apply that expertise and explain it, explain the immigration system, explain what's broken in ways that other people can understand, other people can act on your recommendations. So in speaking about recruiting and retaining international professors, scholars, and researchers, there's a lack of understanding of the role that immigration plays in doing so. When you search for these needed talented people, it's an international search. It's not just a search for people in the United States. So when you seek to hire someone, you're not looking at what their nationality is, what their citizenship is. But if you happen to find this best person, this person with the skills that you need to teach the next generation of Americans, if you find that person is a foreign national, you're in for a fun ride. When you look at the person's status, which you will have to do, you can hit a number of snags. And often you're brought in after the search is done, after the job offer has been given, or the research position has been offered and acceptance has been offered. You've got to then take that person and try to squeeze them into an immigration status that can work for you and work for them. That's often very difficult. How you respond when you get requests from people on campus can be challenging. When you look at the immigration system and you look at the high-skilled provisions, you see that much of it is focused on limiting the number of people who come into the United States, limiting the number of people who can work in this country. Even very high-skilled, you have annual limits on the number of people who can obtain green cards. You have limits on the number of people who can get green cards from the same country. And if you have a population in a country that's pretty high level of educational attainment, I'm looking at you, India and China, you can hit the cap, and you do hit the cap annually. And then there's a breakdown in caps based on the kind of education or skill level that people have. So an example of one of the challenging things to explain to somebody who's not been initiated into the wonderful world of U.S. immigration law is the concept of retrogression. When looking at hiring someone permanently, you must see where in the annual distribution of green cards the Department of State is on this distribution. Sorry, that was a very bad sentence, but many of you have looked at the visa bulletin. You look at the visa bulletin quite often, and you have found very recently that retrogression has occurred for people from India and China. That means that the green cards have been oversubscribed. Fun words. So if you have someone that you wish to hire and petition for a green card, and that person happens to be from India and China, we're 5 years behind on that. So if the green card was filed to the person before August 15th, 2007, you're good to go. You can file and you're on your way. If you're hiring that person now and they come from India and China, you can't even file. You can't get the person on the track to get a green card. So what happens there? Well, our immigration system is set up between non-immigrant and immigrant statuses. If you can't get somebody in line for a green card, you have to look at the non-immigrant side. And luckily, after much advocacy by NAFSA and others over a decade ago, higher education and research facilities are exempt from the H-1B cap for skilled individuals. And that right there is very helpful, as the hiring process and the hiring calendar for higher education is different than for companies and others. So the exemption there was done and passed through Congress in this current law now because of the calendar. But when discussing immigration reform, H-1B can be an asbestos-like category. There are a lot of concerns that the H-1B is used in a way that crowds out American workers. There's concerns that in some industries and some employers that the H-1B is used to pay foreign nationals less than one might pay an American worker. There are arguments to be made against this. There have been reports done that the fraud in H-1B is not as prevalent as some would have you believe. But there is this concern, and it's a valid concern. And so during any immigration reform debate, we have to be aware of this exemption that we have and protecting the exemption. And higher education and international education has quite a role in explaining the importance of this exemption. In the immigration system right now, there are so many points where the programs no longer work for many types of people that are interested in immigration reform. And there's a trickle-down effect that happens where if someone can't get a green card because of backlogs and delays, you turn to the non-immigrant categories. And in the H-1B system, there are challenges there. When filing for either, you must deal with the Department of Labor. That brings its own problems with the demands on the systems and proof of recruiting and other things. So with that portion, working with the Department of Labor, we must provide information to Congress and others to help people understand the process, where the problems break down. The current immigration system doesn't take into account global mobility and the need for flexibility. It doesn't provide options for those seeking to hire or bring on someone who's a foreign national, and it doesn't provide options for the foreign national, him or herself. For example, if someone is in an H-1B status, the spouse may not work. If the spouse can file separately for an H-1B, that's great. That's perfectly allowable. But as a dependent of an H-1B, they may not. This is different from say, the intercompany transferee who the spouse can work. So when you have a dual career couple, it becomes challenging for one to sit out the employment market for a long time. And if, as I talked about with the green card backlogs and delays, it can be a very long time. Also, for same-sex couples, the immigration system does not recognize same-sex couple marriages. So there is no immigration benefit that can accrue in a same-sex couple. Very challenging indeed. On the international student side, we have the same problem of the lack of flexibility and the non-recognition of global mobility. You have immigration challenges that accrue with attracting and retaining international students. And people do not understand the positive that international students bring to our campuses and our country. Many American students will not have an opportunity to study abroad. They will not be able to, in their daily lives, have an international experience. Having foreign nationals, international students, sorry, I often say foreign nationals, and I don't mean it as a put down, but with my immigration background, I often default to that, so I apologize. But international students help internationalize campuses. They open young Americans up to cultures that they may not be familiar with, and they show people other ways of thinking. They also help foreign American students to be prepared for the global workforce they will find when they graduate. Increasingly, American students will need to have global competencies to be able to advance in careers and be comfortable moving around and working in other countries. Foreign students also play a role in making sure that less popular areas of studies have enough students in the classroom to make the classes available on an ongoing basis. And those can be some of the most talked about classes right now, the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. These are the areas of studies American students aren't quite clamoring for. I know I didn't clamor for them. They're very important, very interesting, not exactly interesting to me in a let's do this for my career sort of way. Foreign students act and take the role of teaching assistants and do many other things to enhance the educational experience on campus. Many researchers, scientists, and so that helps when trying to explain to people who have the belief that every foreign student on a campus takes the place of an American student. With the large number of people who are going back to school, especially in community colleges, this accusation is something that we hear increasingly, and being able to explain that it's not a zero-sum situation. One person doesn't replace another person, and explaining the positives that international students bring to the campus will be helpful in dispelling some myths and misunderstandings that we encounter with international students. Also, there's the question of security. Unfortunately, the myth that many of the 9/11 hijackers were foreign students still still comes up in conversation, still comes up in the media from time to time, and being pardon me, being able to explain that that's not true. One person came to the United States as a foreign student, two were seeking to change their status, but that's a very limited number, and it is not the case that foreign students are dangerous or in any way hamper our security. They actually enhance national security. We get to know them, they get to know us. Many of these foreign students return to their home countries to become leaders in their government and their civic life, in art, and many other things. So understanding the role of foreign students, the need for foreign students, and the growth opportunities that foreign students have in studying outside the United States. Not only the United States isn't the only player in this game any longer. Many other countries are seeking to attract and retain foreign students. Foreign students, when they graduate, are among the pool of potential employers. When employers come to campus in the United States and in other countries, many of the people that they interview are interviewed are foreign students, and these foreign students are looking for work opportunities to extend their educational experience, but also to get the work experience in the area that they've studied. And providing options for this work upon graduation is very important. There's much talk about stapling a green card to the diplomas of people that are highly skilled and study in STEM degrees. This can be controversial, but in seeking to advance U.S. competitiveness in the global marketplace, this is one area of possible change that we need to discuss as a country, and having international education and higher education play a role in discussing the benefits of international students is quite necessary. One last area I'd like to touch on is state-level immigration laws. Pretty timely since the Supreme Court heard the arguments on the Arizona immigration law yesterday. First, I'd like to say that the states are taking on the role that the federal government has advocated over a number of years. And it's understandable that states are seeking to engage in this area. The Supreme Court case yesterday only looked at 4 parts of the Arizona law, much focused on criminalizing being undocumented in the state, not carrying documentation, making it illegal for people to seek employment, similar things such as these. The concern with state-level immigration laws, one part is the documentation that is provided for people to prove that they're legally in the country. When you think of foreign students, they get duration of status, and that's not a date certain for an expiration. So that's very difficult for people even familiar with the immigration system to understand. And there's the confusion about visa status versus immigration status. Very often people will say, oh, well, the visa has expired, so they're obviously in the country illegally. That, as we know, is not the case. So when laws at the state level are perceived to target people who do not look American, that becomes very difficult in the international education realm. What does American look like? We're lucky to, I say, we're lucky to be in a country that everybody looks American. Nobody doesn't look American. But if in the implementation of state laws there is a determination of I'm going to speak to someone or stop someone because I'm concerned that they don't look American, that's a problem. So we will continue to have discussions on the state immigration laws, concerns about the patchwork of immigration laws that could be developing. We look forward to seeing or hearing what the Supreme Court decides on its take on the Arizona law, and we expect to hear that in sometime in June. So all of higher education must care about immigration reform. Only those who understand higher education, those who understand international education, can explain the needs of the community. International education is embedded in U.S. higher education. The future promises increasing global collaboration on the researcher-scholar level as well as at the international student level. We all must be part of the solution. Thank you very much. At this time, I wish to turn the discussion over to Ellen Badger.
Hello, everybody. When we're talking about being an effective advocate at your institution, It's really important that each of us engage in campus advocacy in whatever ways we can, and that may vary according to your comfort level, your position at your institution, and what the opportunities are at your institution to take on that advocacy role. But in the context of our discussion today, campus advocacy has such an important impact beyond what we do on a daily basis in our work, because what it does is it expands the number of individuals, especially those with influence beyond your institution, who can participate in and actually advance the national conversation we need to be having about immigration. So what I'm about to talk about are some specific ways that this might be accomplished. So the first is going to be communicate effectively. And how might that happen? Well, I think we can all agree that immigration regulations are complex and can be difficult to explain to someone who is not familiar with them. But what I am constantly amazed and delighted at is the number of people in my institution who actually know immigration regulations, perhaps from a very personal focus. It might be their own situation, it might be a colleague situation, a family member's situation, but they can be quite savvy when you choose to branch out in that conversation regarding how immigration regulations specifically impacts their professional lives as faculty and as deans. Many departments are highly internationalized already, but what they may not have is the big picture. So that's where you can educate about trends, both at your institution and on the national level. You can be sharing information. The annual publication of Open Doors is a great opportunity to do that, and also the opportunity to compare and contrast information at your own campus. You can be putting things out on listservs. You can be pointing people to articles or to publications. And because many departments and many deans can speak of specific instances where a faculty member they wanted to hire couldn't get here because of visa issues or complications with someone applying for permanent residency when they're being offered tenure, it can be helpful to look at the specific examples that they may come up with and explain what really happened in that immigration context. I can give you an example of an instructor of Arabic that our Arabic Studies Department wanted to hire, who was a citizen of Egypt and happened to be teaching in Canada at the time. And the last time he had gotten a U.S. visa, he had been home in Egypt and really had had no problem. And so here he was in Canada, and he was going to be coming to Binghamton now to teach, and citizen of Egypt, and didn't really think he'd have a problem again. But what he had forgotten about and what the faculty weren't aware about was how closely scrutinized visa applications from the Middle East were being managed by State Department officials due to what's colloquially called the Arab Spring, but are the series of revolutions and uprisings against existing governments that began to occur in January of a year ago with Tunisia. And so he had to go through a security clearance that took much longer than anyone expected. He was late to the start of his appointment. The department had to hire a temporary instructor at great cost and trouble to them, and no one was really happy. And that is an opportunity where that situation can start a conversation. Another way to be an effective advocate is have data. Many people at your campus are data wonks. They love to look at charts, Excel spreadsheets, and comparative data. And what's wonderful about our field is that NAFSA and also the Institute of International Education, as two examples, do great jobs at making that national comparative data available to us literally with just a few keystrokes. And as I mentioned a moment ago, a great way to plug your own institutional data in. How many people on your campus know how many international students are enrolled and what percentage that is of your total population? How that breaks out undergraduate and graduate, how that population has been growing. What about your international faculty, staff, research scholars? How do international students populate your programs on the undergraduate and graduate level? Where are they concentrated? Can be very, very interesting data for schools to look at. And economic impact data is huge, and this is where NAFSA really shines. And if you go to the public policy section of the NAFSA webpage, you will find the link to the economic data by state, and then within state it drills down to congressional district, and your federal relations officers will love that data because they are able to show the economic impact that all of the schools in the congressman's or congresswoman's district have on supporting the community and supporting the institution. And this all serves as ways to highlight the international students on your campus. And that is data you definitely want to share. An even more effective way to be an advocate is to tell a story. Stories are a great way to demonstrate the dysfunction in current immigration law and the need for immigration reform. And sharing the personal individual impact that an immigration system that's kind of broken has on your campus can be crucial to getting people on board with advocacy and to support change. So let me take a moment to tell you 3 stories. My first story is someone who is currently on H-1B. The H-1B employment is ending. Person has been admitted to a doctoral program with full funding and so is applying for a change of status from H-1B to F-1. And she is married. Her wife is a U.S. citizen. In New York State, we have a Marriage Equality Act, one of the few states that have passed it, and it's been a great law to many people, and then a huge source of frustration when you realize that its benefits only extend to the state level and not at the federal level. She has been happily traveling home on a yearly basis to visit her family on her H-1B, which, as many of you know, is a dual intent visa. You could have immigration intent or not. But she's going to change to F-1, and she is married, even though the federal government does not recognize that marriage to a U.S. citizen. If she travels to her home country, and she will need an F-1 visa to do that, she applies at great risk to herself because the F-1 visa is not a dual intent visa, and you have to show intention to return. And she will be judged to be a pending immigrant based on that marriage to a U.S. citizen, and so basically she can't travel. Story 2. 3 doctoral students from Jordan, all studying industrial and systems engineering, decide to go home to Jordan during winter break. They have never in the past encountered any difficulties with applying for F-1 visas, and they don't expect to do so at this point. Their research is looking at systems in hospitals to improve efficiency. Every single one of them goes through visa clearance, security clearance when they are home in Amman. They had planned to be back by the end of January because these are hundreds and thousands of dollars projects that they are working on for regional hospitals. They do not return until March. These are contracts. They have with the hospitals for this work. There are deadlines. The projects are in upheaval because they are, in several cases, 6 to 8 weeks late getting back. And this was a huge problem for research. And what was the message that students got from all of that? Don't travel home again, which is a terrible message to give students. Of course we want them to be able to travel home. What is needed? A much more transparent visa process and a better understanding regarding who needs to be put through security clearances. Story number 3. I call this how hard it is to prove a negative. Under current immigration law, most non-immigrant visa categories, including the F-1, have to show that they are not pending immigrants. And it is kind of hard to prove that negative. Although Study USA and all of the public speeches by State Department officials talks about how much they want to welcome international students to the United States and encourage students to come and make contributions to U.S. society, the fact remains that our country's immigration laws have not yet changed. Students still have their visa applications denied due to immigrant intent. Schools are frustrated when they make an offer of admission to a gifted student who ultimately may not be able to come. And what kind of contribution might that particular student have made to our society? What is that doing to institutional enrollment planning? Many of us feel that the F1 visa needs to be made a dual intent visa similar to H-1B. Another way to be an effective advocate is to build relationships. And how might you do that? Well, let's start with the Federal Relations Office. Introduce yourself, find out the issues that are a focus for your Federal Relations person, and you may also be very pleasantly surprised and pleased at how knowledgeable they are on immigration regulations, especially as it impacts university research. They know all about licensing, they know all about the interaction between grants and who can work on them, security issues for federal government funded projects, and they can also be a very good advocate for giving information to you. And in an ideal world, you sit down, you have that meeting of the minds, and you might be sharing with them information that you see. For example, notices of proposed rulemaking that have an impact on immigration reform. And depending upon where you are situated in your institution, you may have the opportunity to send a comment about that proposed rulemaking, and you may be seeking input and support from your Federal Relations person to find out how your congressperson, how your senator feels about that issue. Attending NAFSA Advocacy Day. I had a wonderful time at 2 recent NAFSA Advocacy Days within the past couple of years where the Binghamton government relations person came with me. And not only did he have so much to contribute to the knowledge of for myself and my colleagues, but he opened the doors to meeting some people who I otherwise wouldn't get to meet. When we're talking about building relationships with your media office or your communications office, it's very important that you know the policies of your institution for staff and faculty to speak to the media. It's also important for you to know what may be considered sensitive issues or topics. And at least at Binghamton, I always discuss what I'm going to say with our media staff, or I invite them to sit in on the interview. And of course, very important in chain of command, make sure that your supervisor knows what you're doing, especially in the area of advocacy. And the hope is that key colleagues and leaders on campus will, over time, help to carry forward these messages about what's at stake for U.S. higher education when it comes to immigration reform, and realize that immigration reform has a huge impact on the institution as a whole, and not just necessarily a specific individual. Another way to be an effective advocate is to walk the walk. And so how might you engage your media and your Federal Relations people? Well, one of the best ways to win a person over to your side, I have found, is to feed them. So take them to lunch. And during that lunch conversation, you may find a lot of topics of shared interest. You can mention what the hot topics are for immigration reform now based on the information you've received at this webinar. You can share some of those ideas with your Federal Relations person. For example, what would be mine? Well, mine would be modifying the criteria for U.S. visa applicants to make it dual intent. Another one of mine would to see a Marriage Equality Act passed at the federal level. I also have a professional interest in undocumented students. And there's a very interesting interplay between those colleges who have, those states rather, who have passed laws that allow undocumented students to attend schools versus states that have passed laws that do not allow undocumented students to attend their public colleges and universities, and a, quote, DREAM Act on the federal level that has basically been a dream since 2001, and it's now 2012, to try and get something happen on the federal level. So sharing information on legislation, inviting them to attend Advocacy Day, sharing comments that I might be writing for notices of proposed rulemaking, helping me get the information out, and knowing what he's hearing on campus from the faculty and deans and vice presidents that he or she is in contact with. With campus media or the communications office, making myself available to respond to media requests for information when it has to do with international students. And that may not be a comfort level that all of you have. but it isn't always having a microphone thrust in front of your face and suddenly having to sound really cogent and clever while you're barely having an opportunity to gather your thoughts. Increasingly now, especially in the days of internet media, what frequently happens is you're given a submitted list of questions to respond to, which is great because you have the time to write and reflect and share. And lastly, being an effective advocate is asking your institutional, federal relations, and media colleagues to share information with you and to share information that you give to them. And I really do want to acknowledge the participation in today's teleconference of members of institutional, federal relations, and communications and media offices. And those of us who are involved in presenting this webinar to you today really hope that those of you at the institutions have found this information helpful and share the information with media and members of Congress. And now I'll turn things back over to our moderator, Carrie Lanter.
Thank you, Ellen. NAFSA has a variety of ways that you can get engaged in advocating for immigration reform. I would encourage all of you to take a look at the Speak Out campaign on the Connecting Our World website. And that website is www.connectingourworld.org/speakout to see a list of things that we have available for you to participate in. Additionally, NAFSA is now collecting applications for the second cohort of the Grassroots Leadership Program, which will have a special focus on immigration reform. In an effort to engage the U.S. Congress and American people on why we urgently need a national immigration strategy, NAFSA is seeking applicants to work toward contributing meaningfully to a national conversation on why the U.S. needs a fair and humane immigration strategy, creating best practice resources that other activists can use to start a conversation on immigration reform in their communities, expanding grassroots support among other international educators and higher education leaders to advance immigration reform in the Congress, establishing connections with organizations outside of higher education who are proponents of a national immigration strategy like business, faith-based, and immigrant communities. The cohort will consist of up to 20 NAFSA members with demonstrated leadership skills. Participants will be expected to execute 3 high-impact activities throughout the year. Those activities can include organizing a meeting for a group of activists to visit their members' district or state offices to discuss local impact of not addressing immigration reform, hosting an event with local leaders also affected by the lack of an immigration reform strategy, writing an op-ed for the local newspaper to bring attention to the issue, or organizing and hosting a meeting for White House officials to talk about the need for immigration reform. Each participant will have the opportunity to design an action plan that works for them and their community during a one-day program on June 28th in Washington, D.C. I will send this information about the program out to all participants that are on the call, but for more information, you're welcome to check out the website www.connectingourworld.org/GLP. The application deadline is tomorrow, but we are offering a 1-week extension to everyone who is on the phone today. At this time, we're going to start the question and answer portion of the call. As a reminder, please type your question into the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. For the first question, I'm going to ask Heather Stewart to read the question and respond.
Hi, me again. So the first question is, in regarding to security, what about articles that expose some real risks involved with enrolling foreign students? That is a very interesting question. So in dealing with questions about security for foreign students, one thing that you can always discuss is SEVIS. That tracks foreign students from the time they are admitted to the university and an I-20 is issued throughout their foray in the United States. They are the most tracked foreign nationals in this country outside the penal system. So in responding to that, 1, you have the SEVIS database. 2, foreign students are no more dangerous than any other foreigner in the country. When you have people that are coming here as tourists and any other reason for coming to the United States, there is nothing about the foreign student population that makes them dangerous. And we have seen this throughout our history, and we have welcomed millions of foreign students to this country, and they actually benefit the United States. They help our security by opening us up to other countries, showing that we are a welcoming nation, often showing the myths that sometimes are said about the United States. Not that we don't have our problems, we do, but coming here, getting to know us getting to know them, very positive experience. Another question that is up that someone has provided is showing data and statistics about the positive economic impact that foreign students have to the United States. We have this information on the NAFSA website, very helpful. Annually, we do an economic impact statement that looks at the positive economic impact that foreign students have in the United States. It's broken down by state, by district, by school. So that can be a very helpful bit of information, resource to share on your campus with your members of Congress and others that you're interested in influencing. With the next question, I'd like to turn it over to Ellen, if you could answer one or two of the questions.
Okay, hi everybody. At the moment I just have one question and I'll read it. If a small university
Ellen, did we lose you?
I hope I'm there. Can you hear me?
Oh, good. Oh,
Yes.
good. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I'll read the question first. At the moment I have one question. If a small university does not have a federal relations office and really no one in the position, what additional sources of support and relationship building may be available? And that can be very, very true at institutions. And in that case, it might be more the campus media or publicity person that you might be working with more closely. You may also want to actually check to see if there might be someone who's serving in the role of a federal relations person without necessarily having that title. In other words, what staff person at your institution is interacting with federal and state governmental representatives to forward the mission of your institution, whether that be instructional or research. But working with your media person is a good way to go, and also looking at the resources that NAFSA has for advocacy to get the training that you might need to be a more effective advocate at your institution.
Great, thanks, Ellen. The next question that we have is from someone who is wondering if you have to be on a university campus to apply for the Grassroots Leadership Program. And the answer to that is no. The only requirement is that you have to be a NAFSA member in order to participate in the Grassroots Leadership Program. Another question that came was if we could repeat the web link for the Connecting Our World website. It's connectingourworld.org/speakout, and that's where we have the information on the immigration reform campaign. And the URL for the economic impact statement is nafsa.org/EIS. The next question, I would like to bring in a colleague to answer that's focused on the regulatory regime and changing the ability of foreign students to work in the United States. I turn it over to Steve Springer in our regulatory department.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Yeah, not much definitive to say about this, I guess, other than the fact that it is definitely on our list of priorities. our leader group, the International Student and Scholar Regulatory Practice Committee, helps us prioritize regulatory and liaison issues, and this is certainly one of them. We're looking at all of our different routes for trying to advocate for this, and we'll continue doing so. It's part of a larger sort of advocacy for expanded employment for international students, not only expanded off campus, but expanded interpretation of STEM codes and so forth.
Thank you. And one complexity that we didn't really address on this call is the difference between the need for immigration reform to go through Congress and also the regulatory regime that is in place. At NAFSA, we're very lucky to have a very active liaison department that interfaces very regularly with SEVP and with USCIS to advance the goals of having the regulatory system work for NAFSA, its members, international education, and the higher education community. There have been a couple of questions about working with people off campus and how to engage with community leaders who allay fears of the high, there's some issue going on here, I apologize, to be able to make it clear the contribution that higher education makes and to make sure that foreign students have a positive experience here in the United States. For engaging with the wider community, it's helpful for you to provide insight within your community about the work that is done on higher education, about the programs that you provide for international students so they are part of the community, that they integrate into the community. And one very positive thing that all of you can do is try to change the discussion that's taking place on immigration. Try to insert some positive discussion about immigration. Not all immigrants are dangerous or coming here to violate the law, take jobs from American workers. That is not the real face of immigration. Having frank discussions, difficult discussions with your neighbors, with your family, to try to raise the debate, and you can model what you want your government officials to talk about and raise the debate and take down or reduce the shrill screaming at each other. We agree that we need immigration reform. We all need to talk about it and come to some resolution. Only by compromising and recognizing that the word compromise is a positive, not a negative. We need to chart a new path, and everybody in the United States needs to be involved in discussion moving forward. Ellen, I turn it over to you for the next question.
Okay. The next question is, I don't want to mention the state, so I'm going to say I live in a state where legislation has been passed that is very restrictive in terms of immigration, which is not quite what this question said, but I want to protect some of the detail here. And so the person goes on to say, I've been hesitant about getting involved with advocacy because I'm afraid it could have an impact on my job. Any advice on how to approach higher-ups? And that's a great question, because the fact that a state has passed legislation that can be regarded as highly restrictive puts a state institution in a little bit of a difficult position, because as a state institution you want to be welcoming and have access, and at the same time you are bound to obey state law regardless of how you personally feel about it. And so I think that that's a conversation, if it were me, because I can only answer, from how I would manage it. That would be a heart-to-heart conversation that I would have with my supervisor. How far can I go? How public can I be? What sort of advocacy can I do? And many institutions have been very savvy about figuring out how to navigate in that kind of framework. And so it might open up a very useful conversation with a number of people from another of offices who can create an atmosphere of safety for you to be able to advocate but not worrying about losing your job.
Great. And we had a question come in that somebody had asked about the Grassroots Leadership Program, and the person had already applied, and there may be others that are on the call that have a similar question. If you sent in an application for the Grassroots Leadership Program already, you do not need to reapply. We have your information. We also have a question or a statement that said that it was very difficult to understand the web addresses. So everybody knows I will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody who registered for the teleconference that will have a link to all of the web addresses and web links that we spoke about today. We have time for one more question. So I'm going to turn that over to Heather for the final question of the call.
There's a question about the DREAM Act. How do you respond to the general objection and feeling from people who oppose the DREAM Act regarding foreign illegal students who have used the system without anyone paying taxes on their behalf? The DREAM Act has been introduced for each Congress for the last 10 to 12 years, and the DREAM Act would provide opportunities for students who have attended U.S. high school to be able to get conditional residency status after going through background checks and other checks. And they would be required to attend higher education for 2 years or go into the military. In the military, they would have to get an honorable discharge. They would not be allowed to have any criminal background and many other checks in the process. So speaking to the tax issue, growing up in the United States, their parents would be paying many taxes in regards by living in the United States. You pay sales tax and other taxes by virtue of living in the United States and being involved in commerce in the United States. There's also not much data to be had concerning the tax payments of the people who would benefit from the DREAM Act regarding their parents themselves and other types of commerce they're involved in. So I am sure as the debate moves forward, as the DREAM Act is introduced in the next session, there will be opportunities for more statistics to be gathered, more information to be had. There's also the issue of the state DREAM Act. I didn't mention that earlier. Many states are discussing DREAM Acts or have passed them on their own. State-level DREAM Acts are very important to provide access to higher education for children who are raised in the United States and were brought to the United States, no fault of their own, for being here without status. The one problem with state-level DREAM Acts is there's no way for a state to confer immigration status to the children. That is something that must be done at the federal level. So the state-level reforms can only speak to the ability to go to higher education or to receive some types of student aid, things that are at the state level.
Great. I'd like to take this time to thank Heather Stewart and Ellen Badger for their expertise on the issue and for sharing thoughts with us today. This concludes the teleconference. I want to thank all of you for your time. I am sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions, but if you have a follow-up question, you're welcome to send it to grassroots@nafsa.org. Again, that's grassroots@nafsa.org, grassroots@nafsa.org. Thank you all for your time and have a great day.